Quick sound check, make sure people are there. Rich, I can't hear you for some reason. Hold on. Yeah, I still don't have you. Can people hear me? If you can hear me, go ahead and raise your hand on the control panel there. Looks like people can hear me just fine. I can't hear Rich though for some reason. So let me open up the microphone for one of our attendees and see if they can hear me or they can talk. Let's see. Very quickly. Got people loading up. Give it a couple seconds here. So Linda Frost, if you can unmute yourself, see if you can speak so I can hear you. Nope, not going to work.
Oh, there. Can you hear me, Bill?
Yep, got you loud and clear. Just want to make sure the
Okay.
sound's working. So Rich must be having a little bit of issue there. Can't get audio. Over the settings, messing with that already. Go to audio, and then if you have to, you can hit phone call and then dial in. I saw a green thing pop up, Rich. Maybe speak. Nope, not there. A second ago, no, I can't hear you at all. A second ago, the green thing popped up with your microphone.
Okay. Okay.
There you go. Now we got
now. I think we have it.
Okay.
I had to switch it from computer audio to no audio, then back to computer audio, then it worked.
Yeah, that happens sometimes. I've had the same thing happen. Good.
So
Okay, let's get
that.
ready.
Do you have 10 seconds, 15 seconds? On some of these, you weren't clear on who's doing which slides. For example, 26.
Well, we'll figure it out when we get there. That's okay.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Good, because we're live. Got everybody on. Okay, so it's just after 1 o'clock, 1:01, Central Daylight. No, not daylight. Central Standard Time. And as I look out the window, I see snow coming down here in Chicago. So Linda Frost, thank you for hopping on the microphone. I know that you're in Southern California along with Joe Colavita and a whole bunch of other people. Guess what? It's snowing here, and I know it's not snowing in Southern California. George, can you hear me? And so George Kapsakis says he can't hear me. So sign off and sign back on. Let me do another sound check, make sure everyone can hear me. Bill Bear, Brian Hagman, raise your hand on the control panel if you can hear me. Everyone, okay, good. So we're getting through just fine. Thank you very much. And let me just tell George to sign off and sign back on. Off and back on. Must be because of the snow in Chicago. Perfect. Okay. All right, so let's get back to it again. So good afternoon, everyone. From a snowy Chicago area on this 15th of November. Glad to have everybody here. Today's webinar is on the updates to the 2024 code development process for the International Code Council. And then we'll spend a little bit of time on the NFCA's contractor accreditation program, and then the UL qualified fireproofing contractor program. Rich Walke joins me from CTI, Creative Technologies, Inc. He's a consultant to us here at the NFCA, and I can't thank him enough for being part of our team here. He adds a lot of depth in standards knowledge, code knowledge, and just great common sense and history, having been involved with fire testing for many, many years. And several of the standards he was involved in doing changes to, the E119, UL263, Those have been around 100 years, but some of the other standards he was involved in as well. The UL product IQ that you see, he was on the team to develop it when he was with UL for 42 years. So a big thanks to our NFCA board of directors. You see them on the screen, but if you run into them on a job site, or if you see them at the conference coming up in Charlotte in the springtime, reach out to the board and say thank you. The board travels once a year outside of the conferences for a board meeting. We usually do it in September here in Chicago. They also get together for teleconferences from time to time to talk about various issues in the industry. Cool thing is we've got a great mix of people, you know, younger people, I won't say older, but people that have been around for a while, and everything in between. It's a great group, got some Canadian representation, US representation, and at some point we'll have representation from around the world as well. What's the NFCA do? They do a lot. They, meaning us. We do a lot. Rich and I hung out at the International Code Council's code development processes. You're going to hear about that. 3 weeks ago, I was in New Orleans for the ASTM meetings, ASTM E6, which controls ASTM E605 and ASTM E736. I sit on the Fire Protection Features Committee at NFPA and get to vote on things there as well. We work with the American Iron and Steel Institute, as well as the American Institute of Steel Construction, to help make codes better and standards better. We work with the National Building Code of Canada. I submitted several code development proposals for special inspection, adding the UL Qualified Fireproofing Contractor Program to the code, and much, much more. Know that your NFCA is everywhere, doing what it should do, putting your fireproofing industry on the map in lots of different places, whether it's international accreditation services, Society of Fire Protection Engineers, much, much more. So what you see in front of you is you know, something Rich and I will talk about later on. That's the building code development process for the International Building Code. And here, this is Rochester, New York, and we were speaking on the committee action hearings, where there's a committee of 13, 14 people, and then an audience that we're speaking to. Each code development process a little bit different, and we'll talk about that later on, but the NFPA process, different from the Canadian process, different from the International Building Code of the USA process. Your NFCA Handbook of Knowledge, Accepted Fireproofing Knowledge, still available. You get a $500 discount. It's a $195 document for members. Non-members pay $695. So, you know, it helps pay for a third of the dues, believe it or not. It's the study guide for the NFCA live and virtual fireproofing education and also fireproofing exams. These exams are used for the company to get themselves accredited, for the individual person to become a designated responsible individual. Focus really is on fire resistance and fireproofing in this exam. The NFCA offers it virtually like we did last week, and we also offer it at the conference whenever we do that. It'll be next spring. We might have one more education program virtual before then, just not sure yet. The UL Qualified Fireproofing Contractor Program, you'll hear about later on. It was relaunched in 2020. We fixed a couple of key things that were in it. Key thing that we fixed was, in a previous version of this program, it asked the fireproofing contractor to declare whether the building was restrained or not. Definitely not something that's normal for this industry. Our Award of Excellence, the announcements will go out here shortly with an entry deadline of January 31st. You know, we're thinking we're in 2022. 2023 is a long way away. Think about it though, it's 45 days away because we're at November 15th and here comes January 1, 2023. Hard to believe for me, and I'm sure it is for you guys too. But don't forget, get prepared. We're gonna have some really cool stuff and looking forward to seeing some submissions. Again, look for the upcoming conference. We're gonna have a great time in Charlotte, North Carolina during that program. So what else does NFCA provide to the membership? You know, education exams, world-class fireproofing education, the contractor accreditation programs for the intermittent fire-resistant materials and spray fire-resistant materials, to provide educated fireproofing companies. That new UL qualified contractor program, I think it's going to be a big deal for the industry. Certainly the NFCA contractor accreditation program is what gets it started, but the UL qualified contractor program adds another dimension that the contractor can use to separate themselves from the competition. Your week of learning is always a great time, that educational conference. You know, network with top fireproofing companies, contractors, manufacturers, equipment suppliers, and others. And also know that there's a forum for you to ask questions. We usually have a top 10 program, top 10 issues in the industry program there at that program. The NFCA 100 to the 400 standards provide guidance and provide a third-party proof source for you to point to when a general contractor or other building owner is arguing with you about what should be provided by the general contractor and what gets provided by the subcontractor, fireproofing subcontractor. We also have a lot of technical expertise in fireproofing. Our office line's always open. info@nfca-online.org, info@nfca-online.org. And you can get to us to ask a technical question of some kind. Can't guarantee we know everything, can't guarantee we would be back to you within 5 minutes, but we'll get to you pretty darn quickly. The nfca-online.org website is really where you'll find a lot of resources too. One resource we put up is what you see here. We hear that there are fireproofing manufacturers that have not done all of their due diligence yet on their testing. So what we've done is put together an education program for the authority having jurisdiction who might have to approve an alternative method to make sure they know how to judge that alternative method. Is it actually a listing, or is it a listing based on something else? Is that listing valid? Is the manufacturer able to have full-scale fire tests using the UL 263 and ASTM E119 as the way to get that done? So a couple of quick things. First one is the NFCA members. Thank you for being a member. Without your membership, we can't do what we do. And if you're not a member, I'd like to reach into the camera, grab your wallet, and grab a charge card and run it through and make sure that we've got you as a member of the NFCA. Because without you, without the dues-paying members, we have a tough time doing what we do best, which is go to the code hearings, go to the standards development meetings, promote the UL qualified contractor program, the NFCA contractor program to the places that we need to promote it. Really appreciate the membership there. So let's get on with the program here. And I'm going to bring up the slide numbers that Rich is going to cover and that I'm going to cover. So I've got them all in the right place. Give me just 1 second here, and then off we'll go. So let's see, here we go. Okay, I'm not sure I got the right one then. Okay, here we go. Let's try this one. All right, here we go. So I've got a lot of slides. Rich has a lot of slides. So let's move on. The picture you're seeing in front of you now on the left side is actually what used to be called the final action hearings, now called the public comment hearings. So at this point, we've got a moderator, no more committee. Remember that other picture? It had 13, 15 people, odd number, a committee that was hearing the code change proposals. That committee makes a decision. You know, they'll have a motion, a second, pass, or, you know, approve or disapprove, and then discussion. And then the next thing you know, the moderator says, or the chair says, committee, I need a motion. All in favor? Boom. All opposed? Boom. Done. Code number change number FS2 is disapproved, would be the answer. At this meeting, the moderator does all the work, which he does basically in the committee action hearings. But in this one, the moderator calls to the floor code change FS1. The proponent, person standing at the microphone down the bottom left, would then say, you know, my name is Bill McHugh, representing the National Fireproofing Contractors Association. We believe that this code proposal works because of XXX. And then anybody that supports me gets 2 minutes. There's a rebuttal for 1 minute by the opponents. I'm sorry, rebuttal by 2 minutes. So I get 2 minutes, they get to rebut 2 minutes. I get to rebut only what they said for a minute. And then they get to rebut what I said for a minute and nothing more. No new information gets into it. That's how the International Building Code process works. We got more coming from Rich. NFPA process is different, so is the Canadian Building Code process different. We'll get to that later on. So let's talk further about the things that we do in the code arena. We got a great team assembled, I think. Rich Walke to your left there, Doug Evans just underneath. Doug was a code official in Clark County, which covers the Las Vegas Strip. Rich, 42 years worth of standards experience and code experience. But Doug lived the role of the code official, and he brings a totally different perspective. Rich and I might think, oh, this ought to be just perfect, easy. And then Doug says, oh, no. You guys aren't thinking it from another angle. And I can't tell you how valuable that was in coaching us and helping us get ready for the code development hearings. We also have other supporters from various places. Dwayne Garris from the National Association of State Fire Marshals. He's a consultant, actually a member. He was a state fire marshal in Georgia. He's helped us from time to time along the way as well, the ICC Colorado chapter, and a lot of others have helped too. As far as the code development process, the 17, that's still me. So moving forward, the process goes like this. January of 2022, right, Rich? Was it 2022 or 2021 we submitted? 2021 for Cycle A.
2021 for Group A, yes.
Yeah, and then 2022 for Group B. So what they do is they take the International Building Code and divide it into two pieces. Do half of it on Cycle A and half of it in Cycle B. So you hear about what we got passed in Cycle A and B in today's program. But each January, the proposals are due, like the 11th. So they give you New Year's and you can recover and then get going on code development proposals. That then gets assembled into a document, a big PDF document that gets published in about March. And then we've got about a month to read a 1,000-page document or do the word searches to find out who's doing what to who. And we come together in late April, early April, depending on the time, and have those committee hearings, which was the picture that I had up there. After the hearing is finished, we could challenge the decision of the committee by putting in a public comment. That public comment gets published in a public comment hearing book. In September, October, there's a public comment hearing. That's where the moderator is, but no committee. The April hearings are the committee action hearings. After the public comment hearings, and this is going on right now, the online governmental consensus vote takes place. So they record all these pieces of testimony. Code officials can go in and watch the videos and vote yay or nay on these code change proposals. After that's all closed and done, the International Code Council's board of directors, their council that hears appeals, and others review the document, check out the challenges, work their way through it, and then the next step is to publish the codes. They think that the Cycle B be completed sometime, well, December 2022, but the publication of the I-codes for the 2024 version won't take place until mid to late 2023, according to Mike Pfeiffer, Vice President of Codes, on an industry advisory committee call that we were on yesterday. So let's talk about the proposals, the ICC Code Development Cycle, Group A proposals. And I think this is where I go, and Rich will do the next one. So the first code proposal I want to mention is something that did not get passed. The NFCA put in these code development proposals for a good reason. It seems that several of our manufacturer partners said that there are code officials approving products that have not been tested in UL designs or other designs. There are full-scale fire tests with a load applied. On a horizontal assembly with a full-scale test, if there's a load applied, and a lot of deflection happens because of the steel losing its structural strength, the fireproofing can pop off the bottom. Some manufacturers that decided to spend a couple of $1,000 on a fire test instead of 50, 60,000 on a full scale, those manufacturers that did not do full scale might pass because they did a small scale test. And you don't have the deflection of the deck that you would get in a large scale test. So that's why we put these code proposals together, FS1, 2, 4, and 5. And they were really to talk about fire resistance being a property in accordance with ASTM E119 and UL 263, not modified, full scale in size, full load applied as is stated in the standard, and then any alternative methods have to be based on E119 and UL 263. These were disapproved, and we actually wanted them to be disapproved. No, we didn't. We actually wanted them to pass, but we thought it was still a win that the code committee said this is already required in the code. ASTM E119 and UL 263 is already in section 703, and the E119 test and the UL 263 test require a full scale size and a load applied, and therefore everybody knows it and you don't need this. That's where we kind of differed. So Rich and I did a recording earlier in the year, mainly Rich, and we stuck it right on the top of the homepage so that people that are in the field, salespeople for manufacturers, contractor personnel, inspection agency personnel, have a proof source to say, look, if you're going to approve that non-compliant assembly based on a small scale test, why don't you look at this video first? And that way we can be sure that we've got the right combination of fire resistive materials in the right place. It's available online. Just go to the NFCA website, click on the first item on the very top, and it brings up this education program to learn about that. So Rich, is this where you hop in?
Yes, this is where I hop in. And why don't you just keep control of the slides, and I'll just tell you in advance. So going back to that last point Bill was trying to make on those proposals that were disapproved, there is an advantage to having submitted them, even if they're disapproved, because beyond the video that we recorded, one can always go to the ICC website, pull up those code proposals that were disapproved, and read the reason the committee disapproved it. And it said loud and clear, this is already in the code. It's already required.
Absolutely.
So if you're ever in a debate, argument with somebody about that topic, you can always go to the ICC website, pull that information up. Okay, now we'll move on to the next slide. This next topic, I'm not, can you
Sorry,
advance?
Rich.
Oh,
Sorry about that.
okay, there we go. Okay, this next one was an interesting code change, and it started with the publication of the 2021 IBC, and this is what I call a good code change proposal that went bad in the process. And the intent of the proposal was the fact that if you had hollow members attached to the secondary or primary steel, you needed to protect the outside and the inside of those hollow members. And through the code change development, it got modified to the point where it said basically any secondary steel attachments to the structural member shall be protected, and so on and so forth. But we never really defined, or that version of the code never defined, what's a structural steel attachment. I could think of a lot of things that fall into that definition. And since the 21 has been adopted, there's been a lot of interpretations, crazy interpretations, including that you have to protect the hanger wires that support a suspended acoustical ceiling. Somewhat ridiculous, but in any case, there's been confusion. So Bill and I put together a code change proposal to clarify it for the 2024 code. And we had some help from the American Iron and Steel Institute and the California State Fire Marshal's office in terms of getting the right words that properly describe the structural steel that we're concerned about. So now with the 2024 code, the code will say that any structural steel members having direct connection to the primary structural frame or secondary structural steel shall be protected. So it's very clear what we mean by those steel attachments now. So that'll be coming in the 24 code. I think there's still more work to be done for the 27 code, and association will be working with some of the manufacturer members to try to more clearly define what size of element attached to that primary or secondary steel starts causing a concern, causing a weak link in the chain on that structural member. So we need to define at what point size-wise we need to start being concerned, and then put forward a code change backed by data that really identifies exactly what elements need to be protected. So more work to come, but for now we've got a great improvement from what we had in the 21 code.
Fair enough.
Next slide. I believe you were going to take this one, Bill.
Yeah. The next few slides I've got, actually, this one, there's always terminology is something that always comes up regardless of which industry. If you don't use the right terms, people don't understand what you're saying. So what we want to do is clean up what happens in the field so that it's recognized that intumescent fire-resistant materials are fireproofing. Take a look at what it says here, that the liquid mixture applied by whatever means expands into a protective insulating layer to provide fire-resistant protection. So what we did was change from intumescent coatings and intumescent coatings and mastics and intumescent coating materials, changed it to make it consistent with what the industry calls it, intumescent fire-resistant materials, not intumescent coatings, not intumescent paint. And that actually was our testimony at the ICC code hearings was this is not paint, this is fireproofing. It needs a certain thickness, it has tolerances in the thicknesses that are required to be met. So therefore we ought to clean it up and call it one thing, intumescent fire-resistant materials. Believe it or not, there was quite a bit of, not a lot of debate, but there was some debate on it, whether or not this was the right term or not. But in the end, everybody agreed. It passed at the committee action hearings and then flew through the public comment process without a challenge. Next one was we changed the name of sprayed fire resistant materials to spray fire resistive materials to be consistent with the UL Product IQ, Fire Resistance Directory, and manufacturer's literature. Approved as modified, again, got rid of the resistant. Good stuff all the way around. This one, the section 723 FS 107, this one was trying to bring in performance-based structural fire design through ASCE, the American Society of Civil Engineers, document 7, the Appendix E. Appendix E dealt with basically performance-based fireproofing, if you will, where architect looks around and says, we don't need fireproofing anyplace in this. Or they decide we need more fireproofing here. However, we've only seen it reduce fireproofing, and in our opinion, we believe it reduces safety in buildings because it removes too much. So this proposal was disapproved handily, and then, believe it or not, came back in Group B, and we'll go over that later on when it comes up. Another thing that took place is that we had an alternate in there for performance-based fire design, and we tied it to ASTM E119 and UL 263. So what this did was, instead of straight evaluation based on the ASCE 7 Appendix E document that the structural engineer / fireproofing and fire protection engineer would have to compare the performance-based design to the E119 and UL 263. So we thought that this might be a great way to address it. When FS 107 was disapproved, we decided to withdraw this completely. So one of the things to remember about this performance-based fire design is this person that was the proponent for it came back 3 different times, actually 4 different times. We don't think they're going away. It may come back next year and we'll have to see what happens. We know they tried at NFCA as well to do this, and it's something that's going to come and something that we're going to have to deal with as well. 26, I think you were going to do this slide, Rich.
I was, absolutely. Yeah, this particular proposal dealt with Table 601 footnote B of the IBC. And Table 601 is that very important table that defines the required rating of building elements based on the type of construction. And there's a footnote B in that current table that essentially waives the need to provide fire protection of the structural members of the roof construction if you have a clearance of 20 foot between the roof construction and the floor below. And it's been in the code for a lot of years. And the question has always become, what if you have a mezzanine at some intermediate height above the basic floor level? Do you still need to maintain 20 foot from the floor of the mezzanine to the bottom of the roof deck? And we all felt yes, based on the intent of this proposal. The intent of the proposal is trying to separate the combustibles that might exist on the floor level from the roof construction to justify the need to provide fire protection. So bottom line, we all felt that mezzanine also needed that 20-foot clearance. So we put through a code proposal, and it was very widely accepted. There was no issues whatsoever. Everyone recognized this was a shortcoming of the code. We needed to make this proposal, and it was approved as submitted, really with no major opposition whatsoever.
So what's interesting about this is every time we have a conference and do a open forum, table 601 and the footnotes come up. So you can guess we're going to probably have a couple more proposals for this in the near future, the 2027 version of the International Building Code.
Yeah, and we did have a couple other proposals relating to footnote B that were disapproved, so we'll have to go back and get those, update those and try again.
Absolutely. So moving on, I was going to cover the occupiable roof issues. I'll go pretty quickly through this. Just know that what happened was NFCA put in a proposal, Colorado Code Consulting, the ICC chapter of Colorado put in a proposal, and there were others that put in proposals too, because it seems that on rooftops, building owners and managers want to use up the real estate up there and market it. You know, come to your cool office building, and maybe above my head, I'm on the 5th floor, top floor, maybe there's an occupiable roof where I can go upstairs, you know, get a suntan in the summertime. Not really, but at least try to. And really what we wound up doing was changing the definition of high-rise building to accommodate that. Rich really calls that out nicely here in the slide. So what we did was Steve Thomas, Chums Coda Associates, working on behalf of the Colorado chapter of ICC, said, let's peg the 75-foot level not to the floor that I'm sitting on, but to the occupiable roof assembly. So that's basically the floor of the roof, or where you stand when you're on the roof. That particular assembly is now where you measure the high rise from. For existing buildings, that can be problematic. For new construction, if they're going to do an occupiable roof, they just build it to the height that it needs and not worry about it, because all the requirements will need to be complied with. But for existing buildings, for instance, this building I'm sitting in, I'm probably at about 60 feet above lowest fire department access. If I go up another 10, actually no, I'm at about 65. If I go up another 10, guess what? We're at 75, and now the high rise definition kicks in. Definition of high rise is 75 feet above occupied floor or occupiable roof. This is the new language. 75 feet and higher above lowest fire department access. So as soon as that occupiable roof shows up, we're going to need a standpipe to go all the way up for the hose, for the firefighters. We're going to need 2 ways off. Probably going to need some kind of a notification system in case there's a smoke alarm that goes off downstairs to occupy the building or to evacuate the building. And then the other piece of it is, if the floor is required to be fire resistance rated, it now has to be fire resistance rated. So in existing buildings, we see an opportunity for the fireproofing contractor maybe to provide services to those building owners that are thinking of upgrading that rooftop and turning it into an occupiable roof. So the definition for occupiable roof came in G20. The other ones, G12, 14, 16, put together the definition of high rise, but not necessarily the definition for occupiable roof. High rise says, instead of just occupiable floor, it says occupiable floor and occupiable roof. That was Steve Thomas's proposal. Mine said just occupiable floor or roof. And the double occupiable really took care of any concerns, I think, and made it a better proposal. So we both had the same concept. He did it a little differently than we did. Moving on, the definition for occupiable roof. So it's an exterior space on a roof that's designed for human occupancy other than maintenance and repair, which is equipped with means of egress. Now, I had an objection when we were at the code hearings to this other than maintenance. I never knew that in my early years, first years of my career, for the first 7, 8, 10 of them, 12 of them, I was crawling around on the rooftops all the time. I had no idea that I was not protected on a roof as if I were on the floor below. So I had said that this maintenance thing has to go. And they said, why, Bill? I said, well, if we had a re-roofing project going on top of this building that I occupy, and the roofing contractor decided, let's get this thing done. Let's put 40 people up there to do this tear off, roof replacement. Is that now an occupiable roof floor? To me, yes. And one life is as important as our 40. So anyway, another code change for another day, hopefully. So when it comes to the ICC's Group A proposals, so that would have been in 2021 that Rich and I attended. We got clarification that when fire resistance is needed, UL 263 and ASTM E119 are used. It's used with a load applied in a full-scale furnace. That was huge because we heard our manufacturer partners say, we're having problems with this and we need to fix it. We clarified structural attachments with that FS11, working with the California State Fire Marshal's Office and also the American Iron and Steel Institute. We redefined intumescent fire resistive materials. We redefined sprayed fire resistive materials. Instead of resistant materials, it's resistive, which is what's in the UL directory now. And then also, instead of intumescent coatings, we brought attention to it to call it fire resistive materials so people think of it like a listing. We defeated the performance-based fire design proposals that came up. And then we did several on occupiable rooftops and fire resistance there as well. A lot of good stuff took place in Cycle A. Now let's talk about Cycle B. Cycle B took place this year. Proposals were due in January. Monograph published in March. April, we were in lovely Rochester, New York, where it snowed every morning in early April. Lovely. And got a lot done during that time. So when it comes to the code development process, and I think, Rich, were you going to take these?
We hadn't really decided. I can.
Okay, your turn. Go for it.
Okay, my turn. Thank you. So, the ICC maintains a series of standing committees they call Code Action Committees, or CACs. There's the Fire Code Action Committee, Building Code Action Committee, Code Correlating Action Committee, Plumbing Code Action Committee, et cetera, et cetera. But what this is, it's intended to provide an opportunity to do a deep dive study on some particular topic outside the constraints of the 2 minutes of testimony at the code development process. So the CACs were very active with the Group B proposals, and one of the things they were working on was rewrite of the administrative section 104 for all of the I codes. Those sections are typically referred to as the alternate means and methods. They also were involved with the structural or determining fire resistance based on performance-based designs, I should say. And they are also heavily involved in some of the existing building changes. So let's look at couple of those. The admin 13 and admin 14 proposals was really just a part of a family of about 25 different proposals, but these were kind of the parent proposals. They incorporated all the various parts and pieces that they were trying to get through. These other proposals were just select items within this master concept of admin 13 and admin 14. So in any case, it was again a rewrite of section 104.11 for all of the family of I codes. And again, those are the alternate materials and methods sections of the code. And ultimately, the idea of alternate materials and methods is if you have some construction that's not directly described or referenced in the code, you can submit for an alternate design through 104.11 and provide evidence that this alternate design meets the level of safety intended by the code. So it's quite an extensive provision, much more extensive now as a result of Admin 13 and Admin 14. But some of the things it covered was how do you address listed products? What do you need to look for? How do you use ICC evaluation reports or evaluation reports from UL or others? And also, what do you look for when you're trying to establish equivalency? And one of the provisions that's always been in the code since day one is the fact that one of the items you need to look at is fire resistance. And well, we love that direct reference because it directly described what we do with this association. But the various folks putting together these proposals decided they were going to change fire resistance to fire safety to encompass all aspects of fire protection. And in reality, fire resistance was really the only fire-related topic that was addressed in that laundry list of things that needed to be considered. So they felt a more high-level phrase, fire safety, was appropriate because then it took into account fire growth, it took account suppression, fire resistance, fire stopping, all sorts of different things. So that was changed against our arguments. We wanted to see fire resistance retained directly, but committee felt otherwise. The membership ultimately felt otherwise. But we now need to get onto the writing campaign and maybe put something into the ICC code commentary that basically suggests that fire resistance is an element of fire safety and needs to be considered when using section 104.11 for alternate methods. But these proposals were approved as modified, extensively modified, and I would say overall we probably argued these proposals for 4 hours at the committee hearings and probably an hour and a half at the public comment hearing.
Easily, yeah. Well said.
Yeah. Okay. So I will do this next one also. And existing building proposal 46 related to occupiable roofs on existing buildings. And so here's the scenario that this really addresses. If you have a building that is shorter than the 75 foot that would classify it as a high-rise building, let's say the floor of the upper enclosed story of that building is at 74 foot in height, not a high-rise at that point. What happens if you want to put an occupiable roof on that building? Now, all of a sudden, the floor or walking surface of that occupiable roof is above the 75-foot threshold for definition of a high-rise building. So in theory, that triggers then all of the provisions that Bill was talking about relating to high-rise buildings, and it becomes a cost prohibitive situation. But it's something that's a reality. So there were several proposals put forward that said thou shalt not include the occupiable roof, and some that said you should include the occupiable roof in determining that height of the building. So the one that won out was EB 46, and that one was approved and now requires that the occupiable roof be considered as part of that 75-foot height of the building. So that has huge implications, huge implications. So let's see. Do you take over on this one, Bill?
Sure, EB84, which was another occupiable roof. As you can see, there was a lot on occupiable roofs. I'm not going to spend much time on this. I'm just going to let you know that there's a lot here that took place during the code hearings. I will tell you that, again, the performance-based fire design came up, this time in the structural section of the International Building Code instead of in the Chapter 7. So they moved from Chapter 7 to Chapter 16 and tried to have performance-based fire design mandated in Chapter 16, the structural section. It was disapproved at the committee action hearings, and then we had to fight it again at the final action hearings, public comment hearings, to make sure it was not part of the building code. But it's coming. This performance-based fire design is coming. It's in Europe right now. They've used it. Currently, there's not a supply of people to really conduct this performance-based fire design properly, nor to evaluate it properly at the authority having jurisdiction, the building code official. without those two, it makes it really difficult to make things work. You know, fast forward 10 years from now, maybe it's something that's being done. Maybe not. It just depends on how it's going to go through the processes.
Yeah.
So the
And that
successes we had. Oh, go ahead, Rich.
I was just to say on that particular proposal, this is where Doug Evans was very key in his testimony. He was the fire protection engineer for the Las Vegas Strip. So most every building on Las Vegas Strip is built based on some performance code. So he was the person who had to analyze the fire safety considerations of all those unique buildings. Whoever thought they'd build a building shaped like a pyramid, but he had to make some decisions on that. So his point was there are very few code officials, and for that matter, very few fire protection engineers who are able to make these determinations based on this ASCE 7. And if it went through, code officials wouldn't have a clue on how to do the plan review for those buildings. I shouldn't put it quite so crudely, but they would struggle on doing plan review on those sorts of performance-based design. So that was what Doug was very instrumental on bringing that point out.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was a big help, because we don't have the experience between Rich and I that Doug did as an authority, having jurisdiction and knowing, walking in the shoes and knowing what the issues are and where it's from. He mentioned that he has done performance-based fire design on smoke control systems, but the structural part was quite difficult, and he was confident there's only like a handful of people in the North America that can frankly do it. North America, I should say the US, that could do that particular calculation.
Yeah, and the other aspect is who has the program. There are very few fire protection engineers even have that program. Most municipalities wouldn't have that program available for their people to do the review of it. So yes, it's perhaps a good idea, but we're not yet to that point in time where it's appropriate.
So Rich has given us a good summary here. Basically, we minimized the damage that could have come from the 10411 substitutions. What we didn't tell you is that the person that was driving the bus on the substitution or alternative methods in section 10411 of the building code was employed. He stated he was not employed by Tyco or the sprinkler industry during the discussions. He said he was working on behalf of a fire department down in Austin, Texas. However, he does consult to Tyco, and he does consult to the National Fire Sprinkler Association and sits next to those guys during the code development hearing. So, you know, I'm not going to say anything, but you can put your brain to work and see what you think. But just know that the sprinkler industry was thinking, okay, let's see, let's take an alternative method and let's take water, spray it on the wall, have a fire burning on the other side, and let's see if it'll extend the life of it and make it last longer. In other words, using active fire protection as part of passive fire protection. Our opinion always has been that the passive is primary and needs to work without any assists, an assist from a sprinkler system, for instance. That's where I think this was going. And we made sure to stand up and push back on it big time. We supported the need to protect occupants on occupiable roofs and supported Steve Thomas and many others in that effort. The Washington Association of Building Officials finally wound up with a proposal that said more than 50 people is where you need to start thinking about all the high-rise provisions once that occupiable roof hits 50 people. The third thing was we defeated that performance-based fire design concept that is in the code. Now, it doesn't mean that they could never do performance-based design, because under 10411, it does allow alternative methods, and that would be an alternative method. So if some fire protection engineer, building owner, or architect wants to do it, they can, but it's not codified in the body of the code. So it's something that's an alternative rather than an expectation, if you will. So Rich, I'm going to let you cover the Florida building code, if you could.
Okay. Yeah, we did some work down in Florida for the 2023 Florida building code. By default, they update their codes every 3 years, and had we not submitted any proposals, they would have based some of the items that we did write proposals on based on the language of the 21 code. We already saw with attachments, for example, there were some issues with the 21 code. So we didn't want to get that to move forward in the state of Florida, because it would just create problems for those folks for the next 3 years until it could be clarified. So we were proactive and tried to take some of the changes that we submitted for the 2024 IBC and submit it to the state of Florida for their Florida building code. And some of the things we updated was, again, the terminology for the sprayed fire resistant materials and intumescent fire resistant materials. We updated the attachment provisions to match what was approved for the 24 IBC. We put forward some proposals relating to that footnote B of table 601, in other words, that 20-foot rule. We've got the mezzanine phrase into the Florida building code also. And we also clarified that if you have an occupiable roof, you shall not use that 20-foot rule. In other words, if you have an occupiable roof, you always need to protect the underside of that roof where the roof is required to be fire resistance rated by the code. So I think that was a major win. That was one of the proposals, unfortunately, we lost on the ICC front, so we'll have to resubmit that. But we've got it in Florida, and that'll set a precedent, hopefully, for the rest of the country. We attempted to get special inspections of fireproofing based on the requirements in the 2021 IBC, and that was disapproved. They were very adamant, and we knew this up front. They told me point blank, is we don't believe in special inspections in the state of Florida. Our code officials are well trained through their association with the Building Officials Association of Florida, and as such, they have the ability and knowledge to do those inspections themselves. And true to their word, that was disapproved as we expected. But we did make some significant headway with the Florida building code.
Then up in Canada, as I mentioned earlier, a couple of weeks ago, I put proposals in for the NFCA to have fireproofing special inspection take place. We also put some proposals in on occupiable roofs, installation in accordance with the manufacturer's installation instructions and listings, and then also the UL qualified fireproofing contractor program and the NFCA program. Under maintaining protection, we also are trying to put in annual visual inspection of fire resistance in buildings in Canada too. Many of our contractor friends in Canada tell me that existing buildings in Canada are just as bad as in the US, in that building owners and managers maintain things that they can see. The alarm system, the sprinkler system, the ceiling grid, the front lobby, the walls, all have to look great. Anything above it, forget it, don't worry about it. It'll be just fine because you can't see it. And that's what we're trying to fix with that kind of language. The NFPA codes, the NFPA 1 and 101 are used in provinces in Canada as well. And we've been working at those code development processes too. In the standards development arena, at ASTM, we've been working with our partners such as John Dalton from GCP, Phil Mancuso also from GCP, along with others. Carboline comes, so does Isolatech, Dan Ehalt. And we're trying to make sure that the standards, E605, 736, are clear, crystal clear about what they say about fireproofing inspection as well. We're building a board and wrap inspection standards. Spray fire resistant materials and intumescent fire resistant materials get special inspection. What about when someone uses board materials, whether they're gypsum boards or mineral wool boards, calcium silicate boards, ceramic fiber boards? You know, we need to treat those, special inspect them, treat them just like they're fireproofing. You know, SFRM and IFRM, they should have a certain amount of inspection that's performed, a minimum amount, with a destructive test of some kind as well. So we're working on that as well. And then to date, we've participated in UL and ULC's standards development process, the ULC S101, which would be the Canadian fire resistance standard, and then of course the ASTM E119 UL 263. More the UL 263, we participate in that standards technical panel at UL. We've worked with Kevin Hyland, the new PDE. I'll let Rich tell you what that is because I always forget whether it's primary or principal development engineer, to try to make sure we bring the field perspective to the standards development process, which we think is really important, and frankly UL does too. They welcome us and let us input as much as we want to input. So those are some of the things that took place. The International Building Code, the NFCA's there. We're at NFPA 101. We're at the Canadian National Building Code as well. Rich, any final comments on the codes?
No, no, I think we've covered it pretty well already. I think we've made some significant improvements in the 2021 code. It's been a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of time to do that, but it's well worth it. So now the thing we need to all start thinking about collectively as an association is, where are we going with the 2027 IBC and existing building codes and so on and so forth. So it's not too early to start feeding your input to the code committee at NFCA with your thoughts on what we should tackle for the 27 code. We still have a little over a year to make those proposals, but realistically by spring of next year, we need to start getting some formal activities going to develop those proposals.
Exactly. So if you got code change ideas, info@nfca-online.org, info@nfca-online.org. Just shoot us, think about fixing this. We will have a code committee teleconference into the new year, probably mid-February, maybe even mid-January, maybe December, who knows? Just depends on what our workload is. But we will have a teleconference with the NFCA code committee and put out a call for various code proposals that might make sense. So thanks, Rich. At this point, I'm going to jump in and finalize the last few minutes that we have, which is about 6 of them, and just quickly talk about the contractor accreditation program. We are trying to put this in the building code. And as Rich has pointed out before, what's the number one reason some of the code officials say not to put it in the building code, Rich?
They don't want to have to regulate people.
And companies, yeah, exactly.
People
Other
companies.
than inspection companies, that's the only place that they regulate people, is the inspection companies and the inspectors.
Yeah, and some states have licensing boards which are separate from the code enforcement community. So the code officials think that's really where this program belongs, and maybe that's another angle that we can be working on.
Yeah, it's possible. We're just not sure. The building code, because it's a life safety issue, we think that this is probably a better spot for it. I can tell you that the contractor program, the NFCA's contractor program, has been well received. It does help improve the application quality because it's got some procedures in it and a lot of education. Really, it's an investment in the personnel, the NFCA contractor accreditation program, also known as the CAP program. In order to get accredited under the NFCA accreditation program, classroom and education training, we did it last week for two days, a day and a half actually. Rich and I were on, along with your manufacturer partners, GCP, Carboline, Isolatech, Hilti, all participated in the education of the students, of which we had 30 some odd people go through the education class. Why? Because many of the contractors are starting to use the fact that they've got educated people as a competitive advantage. Maybe their company is accredited and they said, instead of just having one DRI, we have designated responsibility individual, we have 30 of them. And it's being used as a competitive advantage by companies. So classroom and installation training, quality control, understanding the application procedures. It covers both the spray fire resistant materials and intumescent. And in the future, we're going to change it and have it just do fireproofing, all the above. Look for that sometime in 2023 to come true. But it's focused at the designated responsible individual, the DRI. Does that person have the training, the expertise, and prove it through an exam to manage the fireproofing application? Once the company gets accredited, they get a seal or a registered mark, as you can see in front of you, for IFRM or SFRM. Second thing they get is a listing at nfca-online.org at the accredited contractor list. So certainly there's a member list that has all the members, the NFCA contractor list, but then we've got accredited contractors, and in addition to the accredited contractors, there's also UL qualified contractors on this member list. So if you want your name 2 places without a fee, jump to the accreditation program. If you want your name at 3rd place on the NFCA website, get UL qualified, and we'll make sure to put your name, company name up there as well. The accreditation program wants a verification that the DRI has been in business, or in the business, I should say, with experience for 2 years, a minimum of 2 years. and have evidence that they passed the exam with 80% or better and have specific training from a manufacturer. Actually, it says all manufacturers in the industry, but if you do it by type, so in other words, let's say everyone's got SFRM, 4 manufacturers, you don't need to do all 3 or 4 of them. You do only one, and then because it's not generic, but because it's the same type of material, then off you go and not worry about training from those other manufacturers. Maintaining your accreditation requires continuing education, 10 every year or 30 every 3 years. 1 hour equals 1 CEU in this. Now look at the types of programs that you can use to get yourself accredited and keep your accreditation. The CEUs you can get through classes like this, webinars like this, and many, many other opportunities. If you can't keep your CEUs, just take the exam every 3 years and you're good. You need evidence of a signed certificate from each supplier being used. And again, if you can't get one from every single one, use the generic material advantage, if you will, epoxy fireproofing, solvent-based IFRM, latex-based IFRM, cementitious fireproofing, et cetera, et cetera. As long as you get one of the suppliers from each one of those industries, you're all good. So 1 DRI for every location. You know, if you got a separate branch location, it's got to be that DRI. If they cease employment, you got 4 months or until the next conference to replace them. The documents that are included for the handbook and for the exam are the Handbook of Fireproofing Knowledge, all the NFCA 1, 2, 3, and 400, the Product IQ Directory, and of course the AWCI 12B for intumescent fire-resistant materials. All that's inside the Handbook of Accepted Fireproofing Knowledge. It's a great book, great benchmark level of knowledge, something NFCA is quite proud of. Rich helped us finish this. We had John Dalton and Phil Mancuso record their education sessions. We transcribed it, and then I had to go back in and edit the living daylights out of it. Got to a point where I was almost brain dead, and then asked Rich to help finish it off, which he did a fabulous job of editing to make sure that the standards were correct, and several of the other pieces in it. A big thank you to Rich for helping us get it over the top. The book has various chapters. You know, we've got a quality management chapter in the back, chapter 8. We added that when the new UL program came in June of 2020. There's a whole bunch more that we want to write, though. Take a look at our laundry list here of action items to do for that book. Rich and I got like 2 lifetimes worth of work here that we still have to work on, because we're going to be writing probably for another 5 to 10 years to try to catch all this stuff up. I really like that the industry has its handbook now. It never had this, the fireproofing industry, until we got together, assembled the book, worked with some manufacturer partners, worked with Rich, sent it over to UL, and have had some really nice feedback on it. Really glad that this has gotten started, and I think it'll continue as well. The UL program, let me just kind of jump a couple of slides to talk about the contractor accreditation program. Already talked about how much you need to take exams, and also how many CEUs you want to catch. Let's take just a couple of minutes. I'm a little bit past, but I won't go much, to talk about the UL Qualified Fireproofing Contractor Program. Know that the steps are, the first thing to do is pass the NFCA fireproofing exam and become a DRI at the company that's NFCA accredited. Second thing is understand the NFCA Handbook of Fireproofing Knowledge, and then develop a management system. So in other words, take your policies and procedures that result in fireproofing installed in accordance with the listing and the manufacturer's instructions. What is it you do to get the fireproofing installed that way? How do you do it? Just write it down. Doesn't have to be super complex, doesn't have to be a great big book, doesn't have to have 150 pages, just needs to be written and understands what your policies and procedures are. This UL Qualified Contractor Program is really quite good. I mentioned that companies are having people take the NFCA fireproofing exam to separate their companies by having a great staff. Second part is become NFCA accredited. We have a great staff and company. Third thing is we have a great staff, a great company, and our company has been audited by a third-party organization, UL, as to having a management system that is followed consistently in the field. An independent third party came in and audited your operations. It's a big deal. And I think it provides all kinds of value to the fireproofing contractor, to the specifier, to the building owner and manager, knowing that they're getting a contractor that knows what they're supposed to do. What are the requirements? Have your knowledge, be a DRI with the NFCA, get that 80% score on the exam we did last week. Have a management system developed. The management system is, like I said, a quality manual that you would do. UL will take a look at it and say, okay, you're ready to go. We can audit you today. Or they'll look at you and say, okay, it's all good, but we need to adjust a few things. They're really quite good to work with and something you really ought to consider doing. What's in that management system? Here it is. Here's the things that you need to have in your management system. Construction document requirements and review is basically, we've got the plans, the specifications, manufacturer's instructions, listings. Okay, let's look at all this and make sure it works. How do you once you have a project, how do you figure out how to get it going? How do you buy the materials? Do you have a purchase order system? Is it traceable back to the material? So if there's ever a recall or withdraw materials from the marketplace, you can find where it is, pardon me, and get it and get to it to prevent any fire and life safety issues. Storage, handling, preservation, delivery. How do you conform to the safety data sheets, which is where you find a lot of that. Installation, quality assurance procedures. What do you use for quality assurance? Do you check density? Do you check thickness? Do you check bond strength? And when? What kind of inspection and testing do you have for the equipment to make sure it's calibrated and working properly? How do you control materials that are out of spec, out of shelf life? Do you isolate them, put them aside? And then what kind of training do you have for your staff? Corrective and preventative actions, management system monitoring, and of course, record keeping as well. The auditors come out, take a look at your office procedures, and then they'll go to the job site and take a look at that as well. So really two pieces to this management system-based program. If you're successful, you get a certificate, as you can see here, the SFRM certificate from UL in this case for this program. So that's everything I had on this. And at this point, Rich and I will open it up for questions and see what kind of questions we've got out there. I don't see anything in the question box other than, is there a sign-in sheet? No sign-in sheet required. Because you signed up for the program, we'll get you a certificate of attendance. No worries there. So questions going once. Let me see if there's anything in the chat box as soon as I can find it here. Chat box, there it is. Nothing in the chat box. So questions going once to the crowd. Rich and I are having a blast here. We don't want to go back to work.
You're not going to put us. You're not going to let us off this easy, are you?
Yeah, it looks like they are today. Questions going twice. Okay, questions going 3 times. Not seeing any further questions, Rich. You got any closing comments there?
No, nothing further.
Okay. A big thanks to you for attending. Again, if you're a member, thank you. If you're not a member, I'd really appreciate just email us, info@nfca.org, nfca-online.org. Get a membership application from Kristen, fill it out, get it back to us. If you join now, you'll get this month, next month, and all of next year. So 14 months for 12, basically, is what the deal is. So you get 2 extra months of membership by joining now for free. So if you want to join, now's the time. And if not now, when else is there? So certainly would appreciate having that. So based on seeing no questions up here from Chicago, where it's still snowing a little bit, Rich and I'll sign off for now and look forward to talking next month. Thanks, everyone.
Yep. Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon.
See you next time.